Hello, Ben. It's great to have you. It'll be great to hear about a little bit about you and how you got started with franchising.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I've been in franchising for a little over a decade now. Uh, I have 14 Zaxby's, which is Southeastern United States chicken QSR. And then I'm also a Sweathouz franchisee. Just got number one opened up back in September and working on number two and three right now. So um, staying plenty busy.
So, before franchising, you were working, I believe, in finance. So, if you share a little bit how you made the switch, and I think a lot of prospective franchisees, there's a bias towards like blue collar sectors, especially when coming from like a blue collar industry. So, how was it for you?
It's funny because I was, just an independent futures trader, and while it can be very sophisticated, a lot of times it's a pretty blue collar profession. For me specifically, I mean, I had some technology tools that helped me, but by and large, I just tried to treat it like a professional sport where, every morning I would wake up, I'll do my trade plan for the day. I'd go over all the scenarios that I thought were possible. I'd go over my risk management plan for the day. Um, I'd highlight good activities and kind of mentally play through what I thought I would do if the market did X, I would do Y. Um, it's a pretty blue collar thing. You just sit there and grind it out all day. And, a lot of times, it's kind of like a leopard in the jungle. You just sit there and kind of wait for the prey to come to you and try and expend as little effort as possible and capturing your prey. But a lot of the time you're just sitting there doing nothing and just kind of hoping that the market or markets that you're active in, kind of do what you had planned for the previous day. And then at the end of the day, you review what happened. And, like I said, it's very much the way that a professional athlete would, like a professional football team goes through their process. And, they go back and watch the film, see what they could have done better, see where the missed opportunities were, and just try and get a little bit better every day. There's a lot of correlations between what I did previously and just entrepreneurship and franchising in general is that it challenges you in a lot of the same ways that trading does, where by and large you're kind of just competing against yourself, and you're competing. There's no minor leagues in trading. There's no minor leagues in franchising or small business ownership. I mean, the second you step your foot onto the playing field, I mean, you're playing with the professionals. Like there's no minor league of trading, no minor league of small business ownership. You're competing with the best of the best as soon as you step on the field. So it's very similar in that regard. It'll test you physically and especially mentally, both for trading and for franchising. Um, it'll teach you a lot about yourself really quickly, and there's I love all the similarities between the two, even though they're very distinct professions.
Cool.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I was just going to add a follow-on question there. So there are sort of two things I wanted to check with you to see, what your view on based on that topic. So do you feel like you have more agency? You can change more, you're more in control of your destiny with franchising than with trading or investing? That's the first one.
Yes and no. Again, unless you're automating your trading systems, which I did a little bit, But I was still pretty much a manual trader. So it's very much a eat what you kill type game. And if you're not in front of the screen, then you're not making money. Whereas with franchising, and this is like the whole reason why I even got into franchising, is, I wanted to be able to make money while I was sleeping. And, you can do it to an extent in trading, but, I was largely just a day trader, so I didn't hold anything overnight. So, I'm very much not an investor in the typical sense. You can still scale through trading. You just keep adding more and more size or more contracts to the trades. So you can still scale in that profession, but in franchising, small business ownership, you can scale and truly make money while you sleep and have a business that hopefully can run without you one day. And that's when it really starts to get fun, is when you reach that scale to where you have hopefully other people running the day-to-day operations for you, and that's when it gets fun.
Cool. So I'll just add a second follow-on question before I hand it out to Miriam. And I was going to point out, like, if anyone has questions, please post them in the Q&A as we go along, so we can ask them to Ben. But the second follow-on question I had was, do you find it to be any less competitive? Because like, one theory is that when you're trading markets, like, you could be trading and the other person on the other side is George Soros, Bridgewater. Like, every time you're trading against everybody in the world. Versus if you find a territory, sure, it's competitive, but you're not competing with everyone in the world for that geography. Do you find that to be true or false?
I think it's really about the same. Just like I said, that there's no minor leagues. Like, in either case, it's not like you get to kind of ease into it. I suppose in trading you can do, paper trading, with not real money, and see if this thing is going to actually work. But you can't really do that in business. I mean, you can do some kind of proof of concept stuff, but once you open those doors, you're competing with everyone in your genre. And I don't think competition's a bad thing. I think it's largely a good thing. It'll keep pushing you to get better. It forces you to keep evolving. And generally competition's good. I'm friends with Chick-fil-A operators. I'm friends with old Raising Cane's franchisees. I have friends in Bojangles and Popeyes. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. But you do need to be ready for it, because if you have a successful business, there's always going to be people coming for your market share, and that's just, luckily, that's the way capitalism works.
Yeah. So when you made the switch, like, what was it like for you initially? Let's say like the first maybe like 100 years, or the first 100 days, or like the first year.
Well, I started off in just one restaurant, and I was still very new to it. There's a ton that I didn't know what I didn't know, and a lot of it was just kind of baptism by fire. And I'm not gonna sit here and tell you like I enjoyed every day, because I certainly didn't. I was the cook, I was the cashier, I was the manager. Kind of your prototypical single unit franchisee. So there's a lot of early mornings, a lot of late nights, a lot of learning lessons the hard way. The first 2 years especially. But once you get past that kind of initial gauntlet phase, I'm extremely grateful that I went through that period, because it made me into the franchisee that I am today. And I still reference that time quite frequently when I'm making decisions now. While it's not impossible to skip that step and be successful, I think you'll find a lot of the people that are top performers in any brand um, did not skip that step, and or they hire people that did not skip that step. So like I said, there's plenty of days and times when it sucked, and I had worked 100 hours in that week, and was just running on fumes. But whatever it is that's driving you, whatever chip on your shoulder you may have, and it's different for everyone, and it's unique for everyone. But that's my unique chip. Is what still pushes me to this day, and it doesn't matter what the reason is, as long as you have. So
I don't mean to be nosy, but do you mind telling us what is the chip on your shoulder?
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of people told me I was going to fail, and that I didn't know what I was doing, and that that I had a lot of people that wouldn't say it to my face, but I found out through other people that not that they were actively rooting for me to fail, but they weren't exactly excited to see me succeed either. That's the same thing that motivates me now. I played sports growing up, and I hate to lose. I think I hate to lose more than I like to win. And losing pisses me off, and that's what gets me out of bed every day. Is I don't want to lose.
Often that the single unit franchising is more like a job, a grind. Like although you own it and it's like yours and you can sell it, but it's very much like your time is spent there. So I think going from that to like a multi-unit portfolio, like how did you scale?
You have to figure out that first part that you said, that if it's just one unit, it's always just going to be a job, and you're still kind of in essence trading time for money. And if you want to build real wealth in this life, you just have to figure out a way and find a way to stop trading your time for money. And the only way you can do that is you have to scale past one location. So, in my opinion, that's the hardest thing to do in franchising and small businesses, going from one location to two. And once you can make that jump, then 2 to 4 gets easier, 4 to 8 gets easier, 8 to 16 gets easier. You just keep scaling your infrastructure up from there. But making the jump from 1 to 2 is, in my opinion, always the hardest, just because you have to figure out that you can't just manhandle the business. You can do that when you only have one location. You can work 120 hours a week at one location and not have a whole lot of help and make it work. But that plan and approach does not work when you add a second and third and fourth location. Yes, you still have to work hard, but there's not enough hours in the day for you personally to be able to physically be in multiple locations at once. So that step is going to force you to figure out how to scale and figure out how to manage and figure out how to delegate. Otherwise you're not going to make it.
Like going from one store to, in your case, like 14 stores, which is very impressive. But also like a lot of your stores are top performing in the system. So Zaxby is extremely competitive, right? There are a lot of other like talented, driven operators. So now, like, how did you also make your stores so successful in like, such a large system?
I would say it's 3 main things. The first thing would be, both of my partners are real estate people. And so, Zaxby is a physical brick and mortar business. So site selection for any physical franchise is just paramount. What the best advice I ever got when I was starting, one of my mentors told me this, said, then you can pay for a location once, or you can pay for it every single day. And it took a little while for that to sink in, but when you really think about it, it just makes all the sense in the world of, if you get cheap and try to save a little money on the front end, if you want a cheaper lease or if you want a cheaper piece of real estate, that's fine. But you need to understand that, once you get that business open, that one decision is going to cost you money every single day in top line sales. Whereas if you pay up for that good spot, that A+ piece of real estate, that A+ lease that, is almost certainly going to be more expensive, you're not paying for that site every day. You pay for it once, up front and the higher price, but, if you picked right, then your top line sales should be higher, which funnels down to every other part of the business. So I would say that would be number one. Number two is your team and your people. I would say a mistake I made early was not scaling my team up in front of the growth and development that we wanted to have. I would kind of get one open and then try and backlog the team. And I figured out pretty quickly that was a mistake. You need to be hiring well ahead of time for when you actually need to put these people into service and into place. So I would say the people and the way that we've structured the business is number two. We have an owner-operator model very similar to what Chick-fil-A does, Raising Cane's does, what In-N-Out does, to where our operating partners get a salary plus a very big percentage of the net operating profits. So, I've talked to myself in circles over the years of how to properly incentivize other human beings to think and act like an owner, or think and act how I would act in the store. And the only way I've ever found to do that is to, in essence, make them an owner. And so we've structured everything that way, and by and large, it works. And there's a reason why it works. The business case has been done. So that's what we did for that. And then I'd say second piece of the location part is just being in good markets. Did we get lucky being in Greater Raleigh? Yes, sure. I can't see 10 years into the future, or 20 years, or however long you're trying to look. But the markets you pick matters, and if you don't have outs and tailwinds that you can kind of count on in the back of your mind, no matter what it is. That's been a key part of our success. And then, operations being the third big piece of that. You can be in a great brand and you can be in a great market and you can have a great site, but if you don't marry the operations with all of that, slowly but surely, you're just going to piss off all of your guests or members or customers, and then you don't have a business. So we really are obsessive compulsive about the operations, and I still, even with our scale, view myself as a very hands-on operator. I enjoy being in restaurants. I enjoy coaching and working with the partners, the GMs, the AEMs, the team members, and I still enjoy showing team members how to scrub the toilet, how to wash dishes, how to vacuum the floor, like all these little unsexy things. I still enjoy showing people how to do that stuff. So those are the three main things, and they all kind of work in tandem together. But those are the three things that I can definitively say have made us the top performer in the Zaxby system.
Got it. So we have a question in the audience that's relevant. So someone is asking, did you start all of your units de novo, or did you acquire existing franchises? And what are your thoughts on acquiring existing franchises?
Yeah, we've done both. We've done both. We've done new builds and we've done acquisitions. I go back and forth a lot about what's the better path. Um, I think if you're trying to own your own real estate, I think doing the development yourself is probably the optimal path. If you're trying to grow at a really big scale, you're going to have to do acquisitions. I mean, it's impossible, especially still today. It's just impossible to build fast enough if you want to get to like a really big scale. And I would say, as a general rule, it's probably going to be easier and quicker to make money if you're doing an acquisition. But again, there's all of these little things that's going to kind of dictate whether the acquisition makes sense. Kind of going back to, is it a good location? Was it just run poorly? Do I think I can increase the sales? You think of a drive-through restaurant example. Is the ingress egress good, or is there a median going down the middle of the road that's always going to limit the sales? Did they not do we did acquisitions after COVID where people weren't even using third-party delivery. So I knew I could instantly add 10% to 20% sales on the top line just from adding that. There's a million ways to look at it, but I think if the deal makes sense, then acquisitions are a great path and avenue. It can certainly get you in the game quicker too. If you're going to build your own, it's going to take a while. If I wanted to build a brand new Zaxby's from ground up, starting today, it'd probably be at least a year before I could get the doors open, and that's probably quick. It's probably closer to 18 months. Whereas if you do an acquisition, you can theoretically be in business tomorrow. So there's lots of pros and cons of both.
Is it true that franchisors typically, like if you're already a franchisee in the system, it's easier to see deal flow? So is it easier to acquire after you built out the first one?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a great question too. It's a little different in any franchise you look at, but by and large, when a franchisee goes to sell their business, their real estate or whatever, generally the people that are going to get the first look at it are the people that are already in the system. That's not true 100% of the time. That there's still plenty of good deals that don't get presented to the internal franchisees first. But yes, by and large, that is kind of a built-in advantage of franchising, is that when one of your peers goes to sell, you're generally going to be one of the first to look at the deal. That's why going into any brand that like Mr. Flynn is, which Greg Flynn's the biggest franchisee in the world. So I doing any deal with those brands would scare me, because you can pretty reasonably assume that Greg already passed on the deal if anything from any of those brands comes into the open market.
A lot of times we hear like people want to acquire a franchise because like it's profitable from day one. Like you buy it and you don't have to wait, like you said, for a year. So in case of de novo, which obviously has its own privileges. So let's say like it's a year for like a franchise like Zaxby's to open, and then between the opening and the profitability, like what's that time frame like?
Very loaded question, because it could, again, a lot of it goes back to those three things I hit on earlier of, site selection, the team, and quality of operations. So, I can give you in a vacuum answer, but, even in my own group, we've had, one store that took 4 years just to get to break even. And then we had other stores that made money literally from day one. So it runs the full gamut. And, It doesn't really matter the franchise, just again because it's largely just dependent on those three things I mentioned. And ideally, yes, you're profitable in month one, but I would generally say that's going to be the exception and not the rule. So when you're writing your pro formas or doing your forecast with the bank or however you're funding the projects, I would always be really, really conservative. Whatever cash on hand the franchise tells you you're going to need, I would double that number, just because that's just like in trading. The number one rule is don't go broke, and that's really I've seen it happen to lots of people, not just in franchise, just any small business in general. But they go in and they think they're just gonna start cashing checks month one. Like I said, that is generally the exception, not the rule. It can certainly be done, and people do it all the time, but I would not go into any business or franchise with that assumption that you're going to be profitable monthly.
So I think taking a step back, there are kind of like two sides to how people view QSR. So on one side, we have like people like billionaires, like Bill Ackman, right? A huge portion of his portfolio is like held in QSR franchises, and he like talks about it. And then on the other side, like a lot of prospective franchisees kind of like are afraid of QSR, that like it's a very tough business, like it's hard to manage. So you are like, both in QSR and in another like wellness brand. So how do you think of, QSR being a tough business? Like what are the pros and cons?
Yeah, it's certainly not easy. You have to deal with, it's high head count. At each one of my stores, I have, on average about 50 employees. It's hourly labor by and large, so it's pretty high turnover business. Got to deal with a lot of the general public. My busy stores do, 1,000+ transactions a day. And you inevitably deal with, a bunch of assholes every day. It's unsexy. Like no one goes to college and says, man, I just want to fry a bunch of chicken. That's why I'm going to college. That's, I suppose, the bad part of it. But the good news is that because it's hard, it almost acts as like its own natural mode. In that, people hear all the horror stories and, they don't even look at QSR. They look at other genres or franchising sectors. So, I think that's kind of a built-in advantage. If you have a good location and you're in a good market and you have good people and good operations, you can be cash flow positive reasonably quickly, and generally once you get it there, it's gonna stay there for until you screw it up, and so you can make a lot of money really quickly, which I don't think a lot of people really appreciated. And I know that probably sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. You can lose a shit ton of money quickly too in QSR. I think one of the biggest pluses in QSR is you get to own the real estate. And every single person I know, maybe with the exception of Greg Flynn, that is, truly, multi-generational wealth, owns a lot of their own real estate. And, you get to do the OpCo, PropCo, where, the OpsCo hopefully makes money in the operations and pays the rent. And so, as time is going on, the OpsCo is paying down the mortgage of the PropCo. And, hopefully in 15 years, you've got a very expensive piece of real estate that's been totally paid off by your operations company. And so, I think that's the true genius of, what both my partners have done is they viewed it as almost two very distinct businesses. Like half of this business is a real estate company, half of this business is an operations company. And that's where a lot of the money made is on the real estate side. And, it gives you a nice backstop too. Like I'm still pretty bullish on Zaxby's, but if something terrible happens and everyone starts to hate Zaxby's tomorrow, we still have this nice real estate portfolio that we can turn into any other number of QSRs and still collect rent from. Not to mention all the other benefits of, bonus depreciation and, all that other stuff that you should advise with your CPA. 'Cause I'm not a CPA, but it does have a bunch of built-in benefits in that sense. And yeah, I mean, that's the pros and cons, but yeah, it's not sexy. Anything QSR is not going to be sexy, but you can make a ton of money.
So Ben, you mentioned your partners a couple of times. They're into real estate, into structuring PropCo, OpCo. So how did you meet them? How did you know, like more like thinking of it, if you have to find a partner, you want to go into multi-unit franchising partner, how should I think about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, if you have good partners, I mean, it really is 1 + 1 = 3. If you have bad partners, it does just the opposite. And, you have someone that's either dead weight or, is not contributing, financially or, I've always said if you're going to be partners with someone, they generally need to do one of 3 things. They either need to bring some expertise in the field, no matter what that field is. 2 would be they need to provide capital, and 3 would be sweat equity. So if they're not doing one of those 3 things, then they don't need to be a partner. So that's like the easiest way that I try and look at it. And ideally, your partners are good at other things that you're not good at. If we're both good at operations, both suck at finance or real estate or whatever, then like that's not a terribly productive partnership. But if we have one partner that's really good at real estate, one partner that's really good at operations, that's when it's 1 + 1 = 3. We could probably do a whole nother interview and chat on operating agreements and things and ways that I've seen people screw each other over. And everyone always goes into a partnership thinking of all the good things that happen, and they rarely want to think about all the bad things that can happen. And I think it's always critical to address those on the front end of what happens if someone dies, what happens if someone gets divorced, what happens if you have to file bankruptcy in another business, what happens, there's all these what ifs that if you don't figure it out on the front end, then you hit that thing, then you're trying to figure it out after that point. I mean, it could just be an absolute disaster. It could be a disaster with the bank or whoever's holding liens, or it's almost certainly going to be a disaster with that partner and that partner's family. So I mean, I would say that that's a pretty common mistake I see with people that are kind of new into franchising or business in general that have partners, is and it's awkward to do this. Literally the partners and a lawyer all need to sit in the room and literally just sit there and think of all the worst case scenarios, and then think through okay, if this happens, this is going to trigger this. If this happens, this is going to trigger this. So that way, when the really hard, bad shit happens, it's just, all right, this is what the operating agreement says. This is what we agreed to. There's no arguing. There's no fighting. Hopefully no one has to end up in court.
Like a prenup.
Yes, exactly. That's basically what an operating agreement is, in a sense, is is a prenup. And you're like, how do you know if I'm pissed off at this partner, how do I get out? He's pissed off at me, how does he get out? Then how do we decide on the valuation? There's just all of these things that people just never think of until they get to that point, and then once they're at that point, it's too late.
So the other thing you mentioned earlier is you do like profit sharing with your, operator of the store. So we know like there are franchisors that do that, but you do that on your own as a multi-unit franchisee to incentivize your managers to act like owners. Could you go into some detail? Like, can you share like some numbers? Like, how do you split, base comp versus profit sharing? And you still have to pay royalties to your ZOR. How do you make it work?
Yeah, I would not say there's any one right way to do it. That there's a bunch of ways to skin that cat, and yeah, I mean we found something that works for us, but I would always caution people from trying to just do copy paste. And there's a lot of things not a lot. There's a couple things that I would go back in time and change if I could. I've written pretty extensively on all of those topics on Twitter if anyone wants to go back and read some of those threads. Basically, we pay all of our operating partners a salary plus 25% of the NOI. It's after interest, depreciation, amortization, all that stuff. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, again, whatever you have to do to give people to understand that this is very much their business too, and that their financial outcomes are tied to how well the business does financially. Is the only thing that really matters. And how you get to that, is kind of irrelevant. But like I said, there's multiple ways to do it, and that's just the way that we have found that works best for us.
So when you said make a ton of money, what exactly does that mean? Is it because of the scale of multi-unit portfolio, or where does it come from?
I suppose it depends on what your own personal definition of make a ton of money is. I mean, 10 years ago, I thought $50,000 was, if you have one super duper top performer QSR location, I would still say today you can make a ton of money in just one location. It better be a top performer, but you can make a really, really nice living from one super duper good QSR. Whereas in Sweathouz, for example, even if I have the number one studio in the portfolio, it'd be really nice, but I'm probably not gonna be enough to retire on. I think that's one of the other things with QSR too that I forgot to mention in the previous question. That's I think is a very underrated positive, is that there's really no theoretical cap on what your top line revenue can potentially be. With Sweathouz, for example, I've got X number of suites, I've got X number of sessions that can get booked per day. Once those sessions are booked, then I'm capped. There's literally no other way I can continue to drive revenue besides just increasing prices. Whereas with a QSR, your limiting factor is, how fast can you move the drive-through? How many chicken fingers can I produce out of my fryers every 15 minutes? And those things are crazy, crazy high numbers, as Chick-fil-A continues to prove day in and day out. I would say that that's a really underrated part of QSR, is that your theoretical upside is, while it is limited, it's almost unlimited. Whereas with other concepts and sectors, you're probably going to have a pretty finite cap on what your upside is.
So you had the 14 Zaxby's and then you chose Sweathouz. So you were like already a very experienced operator. So, both for first time franchisees and like people who are continuing in franchising, like what's your methodology for like thinking through a brand and, ultimately kind of like committing with them? Like, because there are thousands of brands, new, old, right? Like how do you choose one?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just going to be personal preference of what you want to do and what you want to work on, and, what's available in your market. For me, I had wanted to add a second brand for a while, and, I got pretty far down the line with a couple other concepts. And then, after COVID, I just decided that I wanted to do something that was the polar opposite of QSR. And so that's basically what Sweathouz is. It's low head count, recurring revenue, pretty quick and easy build out. My bad joke is, I've made people fat and diabetic in Zaxby's for a long time, so now I'm trying to like make them kind of healthy and skinny again. Trying to just like even out my karma in the world, I guess. Just I suppose some of it was ego too, and I just wanted to prove that I wasn't a one-trick pony and I could do something outside QSR and be equally successful. Just going back to that same chip on my shoulders, people told me I was an idiot for getting out of QSR, and so I'd like to just, be able to give them all a big middle finger in a couple more years and say, look, I did it over here too.
Like, what is the complexity of ownership when you have two different brands and they're like so different?
There's definitely a learning curve. I mean, I would say because I started at the harder one, which is QSR, went to the easier one in Sweathouz, it wasn't as bad. I could see, if you're going the other way, would be extremely difficult. But because QSR is already like the hardest thing, that everything else under it is easy, or relatively easy. So yeah, I guess it really just depends on what you're starting with. But for Sweathouz, I mean, I still learned hard and difficult and expensive lessons on the first one. We screwed up plenty of stuff, and we made some bad hires on the front end. We screwed up some things in construction. I screwed up some things in site layout. We made a ton of mistakes, but we learned pretty quickly from those mistakes and aren't going to repeat any of them for our second and third locations that we're working on now. So I think that's one of the keys to success, no matter what your business is. It's, give yourself the freedom to screw up and make those mistakes, especially on your first couple locations. But you need to learn those mistakes one time and not repeat them a second and third and fourth and fifth time.
So I think you're like getting people excited about QSR, because there's another question.
Okay.
So it is, what are your thoughts on opening a single large QSR location similar to Dave's Hot Chicken with a high initial investment and high potential revenue versus multiple smaller, let's say, dessert shops with a lower initial investment but lower revenue potential?
That's a hard one to answer in a vacuum. But I would generally say I prefer, give me max upside. I would say, like, using kind of Sweathouz as the corollary. I mean, that's like the only thing I don't like about that business is that, once I'm capped, I'm capped. And, I would hate to do all these things right, have this A+ site and, A+ team and A+ operations. Then, we just hit this wall and it's just impossible to push over it because we limited ourselves with the physical capacity. So, I mean, in a vacuum, I'd say I'd rather do the big one versus the little ones. But, I would also say there's going to be more risk involved with that, because if you just do a big one versus, three small ones, more than likely with three small ones, you're at least going to have one good one that, can kind of help offset if you got one bad one. Whereas, if you're just one big one's just a bad one, then, you're probably going to hemorrhage some cash. So I would say it's just kind of depends on risk tolerance. And, if it's me, I want to bet on the upside, but, other people may want to protect themselves on the downside more than they care about the upside. So I think that's the way that's the lens I would view it through.
So a lot of people in the audience, we sort of know them from our community, and quite frankly, they're just a lot of good operators we know, interested in very exciting concepts. And many times they're looking for equity capital. They're looking to sort of raise money. And I think in real estate, it's quite normal. Maybe in startup tech land, it's quite normal. But here it seems like it's sort of challenging. One question I have is, A, do you invest in other people? Will you consider it? Or do you know people that do that? And how, the short answer is, if I was trying to, open a bunch of Zaxby's, kind of run your playbook, and I don't necessarily have all the equity capital now, how should I pitch it? How should I raise some equity capital to do that?
Yeah, it's the old catch-22 is that yeah, we usually, when you don't have a ton of experience and you don't have kind of proof of work, is when you need the money the most. Then once you have proof of work and a track record and resume, is usually when you stop needing the money so bad. But there's plenty of people out there that'll take shots and invest with people that are looking to make the jump from franchising or small business ownership. I've done it a little bit. I haven't done it a ton, just because, I've quite frankly, I'll pile all any money I make back into my businesses. So I'm just trying to largely bet on myself. But yeah, there's plenty of people out there that'll invest in the deal, and I would say you're going to get way better terms if you can at least do the first one. No matter what it is, you can do the first one on your own, prove you can do it, prove that, you can make money at this thing. And then, if you want to really start scaling, say, hey, I made it work here, so give me some more money so I can make it work somewhere else.
Ben has some amazing threads on Twitter, so I think I'll find, you referenced one, I'll find a few more, and we'll share it with our community. I guess maybe just the final words of advice, guidance for first-time franchisees.
Oh man, that's a tough one. I think as long as you go in with the right mindset and understand that if you're just doing one location and it's your first one, that you're probably not going to make a ton of money the first year or two. But like I said, survival is goal one. As long as you have enough cash, or as long as you have investors that'll keep ponying up in the operating account until you figure it out. That's the whole name of the game. There have been tons of super smart, super talented people that just ran out of cash. If they could have just strung it out just a little bit longer, they get that cash flow to turn around, and then it's off to the races from there. But usually the first timer is the person that we're buying out. 3 years down the line, is that they quit their job, and the husband or wife was used to a certain style of living, and then you get 2 years in of working 80 hours a week and you got nothing to show for it. That's usually when the spouse is usually the one that gets in your ears, like, this ain't worth it. We're not making any money. Um, and that's usually when someone like me comes in and buys you out for pennies on the dollar, flips it around and, take a lot of the equity that you were going to earn in the future. So, I would say just be super conservative in your financial projections. Make sure you have plenty of cash on hand, and make sure both you and your spouse know exactly what you're signing up.
And we actually have a comment. So it says, no questions, except I'm a big fan of Ben on Twitter, from Paul Tran. I love how his insights are very personal and real. Thank you for your generosity. So I think
well, thank you. I try, I get tired of seeing, certain groups of people on Twitter that make everything out to just be, easy, I see the things of, oh, just hire an operator and everything will be fine. It's like, well, it doesn't work like that in life. Yes, that is my model, but, it's not like I just hire an operator and it's like, let's check back in next year and see how you're doing. It's no matter what your scale is, you still have to be hands-on with the business to some form or extent. These operators are still human beings. They're still going to screw up. And they change over time, as will you. I've had operating partners go through the whole life cycle of, start with us and, do great. And, they kind of reach to this point where they're kind of comfortable and happy, and they stop pushing and they start going back the other direction. That's something that you can't really predict, I would say, but you still have to understand they're humans, and what makes one person great isn't always going to be something that you can just copy and paste with someone else. And I would say that is largely my job today. Is I'm just kind of chief psychologist, and it's my job to figure out how to get the most out of those people, and what gets the most out of operator A may be completely different what gets the most out of operator B, and really curtailing the way I support each of them individually to maximize how they drive results in business. So I think it's easy for that nuance to get lost in places like Twitter or social media, where everything just gets simplified down so much. And like I've been broke multiple times, and I would prefer to not be broke again. But the good news is that once you acquire some of these skills, you can really I can take the skills I've learned now and replicate it in any number of businesses. QSR, healthcare, Sweathouz, you name it. A lot of it's just the same stuff of being able to find and develop a good team, leadership skills, being able to identify good locations, being able to understand, what makes a good franchisor and a bad franchisor, and, all of these skills that I've learned over time. So even if I go broke tomorrow, I feel reasonably confident in 5 to 7 years I could build it right back up. There's always a glass half full. But yeah, that would be it.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Ben. This was very insightful. People are commenting. So yeah, we'll share some of your Twitter threads, and I think people can find you on LinkedIn and Twitter, right?
Oh yeah. I took a little break on Twitter the last 3 months, but I'm gonna start getting more active again.
You gotta get back. People are waiting.
I know. I'm gonna get back.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you, Mayor.